All right. Let me fast forward past the motions. Let's go to the first witness who's going to take the stand. By the way, this is the guy, the FBI agent, right? So I'm guessing he's probably doing the analysis. I'm going to just kind of hop right into it. If you guys want me to talk about other topics, clearly I'm going to have chances to do so. But we got to catch up to speed with the trial. We're about like 40 minutes behind. So let's catch up to speed real quick. I want to make sure you guys completely get what's going on. And we want to do this before noon or before like 1 o'clock. They're usually going to break at 1 o'clock or maybe noon for lunch, right?
Apologize. So let me start over. I received a question about when the schedule of the trial, it's anticipated to conclude. I spoke with the attorneys. They advised me they believe the trial would be over before the end of July. I want to remind you also that because the attorneys reminded me, I forgot that there's the week of July 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. That week we're not going to be in session. We'll finish out the end of June and then pick it up again on July 10th. The week commencing Monday, July 3rd, we're not going to be in session.
So he's talking to the jury, telling them like, yo, hey, listen, y'all got to be prepared to sit for this whole thing till end of July.
When we were last year,
into evidence as states 63 and 64. Thank you. Starting with state 63. I'm going to open up some of the records, and if you would be so kind to follow along.
Yes, we're live, motherfucker.
So starting with what is in state 63, going to the tracking number 2058127. And so it's clear. I want to also publish state 28. This phone number 772-713-9807. Is that one of the phone records that you analyzed in this case?
Yes.
Okay. And states 28 is a pawn slip. Have you ever seen that one before?
No, I haven't.
So going back to the same phone number, 772-713-9807. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at in these phone records?
Sure. So this is a report from T-Mobile. It's an engineering report, and you may also hear it as referred to as a true caller quantum data or timing advanced data. But essentially what this is it's records of, from the network's perspective, location where the phone likely was during particular times. So you'll see a series of columns on here. At the top it explains what is contained in each column, and then you'll have a series of entries. All that is associated with a particular time. So column A in this case is end latitude, and column B is ending longitude. It says what the confidence level is, the IMSI, column E, and the INDI. Those are numbers.
By the way, I got to give y'all a little bit of warning, and I'm jumping in a bit, but we just kind of started. This is going to get very mundane, very boring, just off the fact that they're talking about literally shit that you or I would really have no idea. This is like an engineer, forensic type of GPS type of guy's interpretation. They're going to try to break it down in layman's terms to the audience, but still they're going to go through a lot of the shit that's just super technical. So it's kind of like being in math class, but just bear with me, all right?
Those are coordinates on the Earth. So if you wanted to know where a particular person was at a certain point in time or whatever, those latitude and longitude coordinates correspond to a specific spot on the Earth. So we could plot those in any mapping software. Like we could copy and paste this in Google Maps right now, and it would drop a pin in Google Maps, for instance, and say, okay, that's where latitude 25.984685, longitude -80.375979 is here.
And is that what you use to do your analysis, just those latitude and longitude?
No, I use other information on this sheet.
So you talked about the IMSI, IMEI, and so I'm going to go scroll over and just if you could explain. So the next column is, so we said roaming group, I think model and make would be the next columns that for you to explain.
Yeah, so the roaming group, it's T-Mobile records, the phone that records apply to, you can see the model and make. It's an Apple phone, it's an iPhone 10. We'll skip to column. You can see in column K, it will say what type of record this is for. So data, which would be whatever, some sort of internet connection, whether you're using email or social media, or it will say voice and data. Voice is obviously if you're making like a voice call.
Okay, so going down to row 91, is that an example of the voice and data?
Yes.
Make it a little bit bigger. Zoom in so it's easier to see for the ladies and gentlemen on the jury. Okay, continuing up at the top again so that you can explain the columns. Which specific column are you looking at when you are analyzing these records and the data in that?
So usually one of the most important ones is the time and the date, and that's column F, because often when you're doing a case, and in this specific case I was asked, are the records consistent with certain things that the detectives had wanted to know based on the investigation that they had done separately. So you need this time and date.
And it's, when you're looking at this time and date, what is that telling you?
The time of the record.
Okay.
So when like column, or excuse me, row 2, when you see October 26, 2018 at midnight 000, you will know that the latitude and longitude points attributed to that in columns A and B, or a little further down the spreadsheet, we'll see that a distance measurement from a tower that is associated with that particular date and time.
So with regards to the date and time, do you have to take into account if the records are kept in Eastern Time or UTC?
These are in local time, so the same time.
So the time that's on here is the time that the event happens here in whatever location it's plotted in?
Yes.
Okay. So going forward, continuing across, and then which column, you talked about distance from the tower, which column are we looking at for there?
So you'll see if you scroll over further, S and T, you'll see cell site and so start cell, start E node B. E node B is another name for cell site, like 4G technology for cellular providers. So depending on what technology, whether it's 3G, 4G, et cetera, 5G, they call the hardware different things. It performs the same function. So that's a tower. And we will know that that tower is at a certain spot in the real world. So if I know that at a certain time, column 2, whatever that time was at midnight, the phone connected to a tower named 76963, the antenna 23, I can go find where tower 76963 is, plot that on the map and say, okay, this tower is here, and the antenna is pointed in a particular direction, and at midnight, the phone was in that direction, and then we'll see if you scroll further to the right. You'll see a distance there. So in column AO, it'll say 2.96 miles. So at that time, midnight on October 26th, that phone was 2.96 miles from that tower.
Okay, so we've gone through a lot. I'm going to go and break it down a little bit in some of the things you talked about. You talked about 3G, 4G, 5G.
Yeah.
What is 3G, 4G?
Different technologies for, like, I guess, evolutions for the phone. Each time, if there's a rollout, generally there's improvements in how well the phones work, the cellular networks work.
Okay, with regards to 3G, what type of information does that limit you to?
Oh shit! Fuck.
The speed that cell signal travels at, it's the speed of light. So by multiplying distance by time, or excuse me, speed by time, you get a distance.
Is the speed of light constant?
Yes.
It's been a while since physics. So you just kind of explain that a little bit so that ladies and gentlemen of the jury as to how that works.
Yeah, so it's, that's the speed of light doesn't change. Cell signal is the speed of light anywhere in time. It's going to be the same.
Is the speed of light affected by foliage or trees or leaves or anything like that?
No, speed of light's the same.
Oh. Are cell signals or service affected by changes in environmental conditions?
Can be slight changes, but generally not. And if there's a change, we're talking about like minuscule amounts of meters, not miles.
So meters, not miles. And what types of environmental conditions would be required to have a change of those meters, not miles?
Well, if your phone is in a, like, a lot of the buildings down here are built for hurricanes, so if there's lots of concrete walls, that could affect it. If the path that the signal takes to the phone is not a direct line, but say it bounces off something, like we call that multipath, so if it hit a glass building and then came to the phone and then went back, obviously those things would increase the time that it took for the signal to go there and come back, so that would then increase the distance.
Okay. With regards to hurricanes, is that something that would affect? Blizzards?
I mean, if the way that would affect this would be if that had a catastrophic effect on the network and then the network wasn't functioning properly.
Okay. If there are records that you are analyzing, what does that tell you about that specific tower?
That it was working.
Okay. Going on again, so you've explained a little bit about a cell tower or cell phone and how it works, and you mentioned cell towers. What are cell towers or antennas?
Yeah, so obviously our cell phones don't have wires coming out of them to make a call or send a text or do whatever we want on our phones. We have to connect to the cellular network. We do that through cell signal, which connects to an antenna, it's usually on a tower, and then through the network's infrastructure, the call or the data transactions routed through its core and then handle however you need to handle it. So a tower can be anything that has antennas on it.
Have you created a demonstrative exhibit to show the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what a cell tower is?
Yes.
Would it help in explaining and the understanding of the testimony?
Yes.
Okay.
Judge, we're going to object before she publishes it to the jury and maybe go sidebar.
Yes.
Okay. Let's skip forward a little bit.
The testimony of the witness is the evidence. These demonstratives are not to be considered as evidence in the case unless they are later received in evidence, and they should not be a substitute for evidence. Only items that are actually received in evidence would go back and move to the jury room for your consideration during your deliberations. This is to assist the witness in explaining or illustrating his testimony, these demonstratives. All right, counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you. Okay, Special Agent Collins, could you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what we're looking at in this photo right here?
So this is just a generic example of what a cellular tower can be. Here you see it, antenna arrays mounted on a monopole, so just a big pole that you see everyone's driven by these. And so you'll see that there's, on the image on the right, there's two triangular shapes. Each of those on each side, of each triangle shape, there's multiple pieces of equipment mounted on them. So that would be a cell tower example that has three sectors or antennas pointed in three directions. So each of those sides that has multiple pieces of equipment, those are transmitters and receivers. Can I this later?
I was just about to tell you that it's a touch screen, so if you touch it, you can draw on it as well.
Fantastic. So all of these would be part of one sector, one side. All of these would be part of one sector, and all of these. So this would have three sides. And if you think about like what these are doing, is if you wanted to imagine that it's like a flashlight because visible light, cell signal, all part of the electromagnetic spectrum. They have the same characteristics and properties, right? So this would be like somebody standing on top of the pole with a flashlight pointed in one direction, sending light that way. And this side is a flashlight pointed in another direction. This side is light going in another direction. That way there's light or cell signal going in all directions to service, in this case, phones that are within the coverage area of the tower.
So you mentioned a little bit about the coverage area and the three-sided. Going on to what's on page 4 of the demonstrative exhibit at this point. You explained the flashlights and things like that. Can you demonstrate again on this particular image, the sector 1, sector 2, sector 3, and why that's important?
So this would be, as we were discussing further, I guess further drilling down into what this example of a tower could be. So here again, the three-sided tower, and you'll see that each side has a particular direction that that flashlight is pointing with the antenna sends signal. That will be recorded in the tower list by something called an azimuth. So in the records that we'll have for the phone we were just talking about from T-Mobile, it will say the azimuth is 0. And what that means is that the flashlight is pointing 0 degrees, like out of a compass. And that will be where the coverage is the strongest, like that's the center of the beam, but it creeps out. And so it will be covered approximately 300 to 60 for 120 degrees on that side. Each side, if we have 3.
All right. Again, this is very technical as he's explaining it. I'm trying to make sure y'all not bored to death. This could get, whatever. Let me switch over to Melly real quick.
Phone sees. It's based on what the phone sees.
What do y'all think Melly's writing? Do you think he's taking notes? Like, next time I kill my homies, do not bring my cell phone? Or do you think he's basically, like, just doodling and just drawing? You know what I mean? What do you think he writing now? Huh? What y'all think he writing now, Chad?
Closest tower is doesn't have a clear line of sight to the device, then you may use the phone may use a tower that's slightly further away because the signal strength and signal quality are better from the antenna with a direct line of sight, for instance.
Are all the antennas and cell towers, do they look like the ones that we showed in the previous slide?
No.
What does a cell tower look like?
Yeah, I mean, whatever the companies want them to look like, right? They that's a good one because it's that I use in this because I identify that as a cell tower, but I'm sure everyone's seen antennas that look like they're hidden flagpoles, antennas that are mounted on the sides of buildings, up here on the roofs of buildings. They can be small antennas that are just on tops of street lights, or it can look like anything.
In terms of the general direction that the cell tower antennas are pointed, are they at 90 degrees out, or are they angled downwards towards the majority of the phone?
Usually they are tilted down.
If you saw an example of it picking a cell tower that's further away, would you look at the records and try and determine why that's happening?
So yeah, if I see a red flag or something to me that stands out and it's being atypical, when I'm doing my analysis, usually I'll look further into it and say, okay, why is this not connecting to one of the towers that I expected it would?
So we've described the CDRs and the information that's used on those. Is that the same that you did for each and every phone in this case?
So we were looking at the timing advance reports, the engineering data, the CDRs, the call detail records are a different data set.
And just explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what's the difference between the timing advance, the engineering reports, and the CDRs.
So the CDRs, or the call detail records, are records of the phone's communications, like calls and outgoing, certain types of text messages, etc. That will say date and time, the numbers involved in the call, the tower, the azimuth, etc. But it doesn't have the extra information that the engineering report does. So in the call detail records, it looks like billing records that you usually see with your phone if you're people actually.
Okay, I want to get to a little bit more interesting shit. So let's go to so now they explain the cell towers. They're basically telling you how the phone communicates with the cell towers, what speed it goes by. That's what they started talking about, speed of light, and also like, you know, whatever, cell phone coverage. Let's see if they're gonna now bring the GPS. Like, let's see if they're gonna map the info they got from the phone to a real map. I think it's about to come. Here we go.
But it could also just be another tower within the network that saw that phone and say, hey, I can see you, and directs your device and see this far away. So it's important to keep in mind what type of report you're looking at, because it obviously can affect the conclusions that you're making.
So in terms of the way you illustrate the difference between a tower being used or a sector and a timing advance, or the distance measured on that, I want to make sure it's very clear. What we're looking at right now, what does this illustrate when we see just a round circle in your reports?
So this will illustrate the tower that the phone used, or if it's from a data report, the engineering report, the tower that is registered listed as seeing the phone. All the green dots in the middle of this graphic, those are all cell towers, and you'll see that there's one tower in the center of the map that has a blue circle around it. And so that would be the tower that the phone connected to. That's not, I think it's not like if you're using Google Maps and you're used to seeing a blue dot when you pull that out. This is not the location device. This is the tower.
Okay, and can you just, so it's clear, point out a couple of the towers that are on this map and just highlight them so it's clear what you're talking about, because sometimes the color doesn't come across great on the screen.
So these green dots would be other towers that weren't used or weren't that didn't see the phone. This one here in the center of the blue circle would be the tower that was listed on the report, and then this big blue circle, that's not a coverage area, that's not saying that, hey, the phone has to be somewhere. Then here I'm just flagging that as saying that is the tower that is listed in the report. That's the tower that was used over a cell phone.
Is it your testimony that the phone is definitely within that circle somewhere?
No, definitely not.
Why not?
That's not what this is intended to do. This is just intended to show this is the tower.
Okay. So now we're going to go into the cell site. How would you indicate that in your report?
So cell site, meaning tower and sector, or tower and antenna. This is showing the direction that the flashlight is pointed. So this like wedge or slice of pie, or however people like to think about it, that will show the direction the flashlight's beam. So the azimuth, the center line would be, in this case, like 180 degrees due south, and then the illustration shows the estimated like ends of the coverage area. But what's really important about this is that this is just showing the direction that the antenna is pointing, the direction of the beam. So this is, again, not showing where the phone is. In other words, I'm not saying that the phone has to be within this blue shaded area. I'm not saying that the phone has to be within the arms of this black wedge. I'm saying this is the direction that the antenna is pointing.
Are you able to tell anything about the strength of a signal from a tower at any given time?
No.
Why not?
It's not reflecting the records that I have.
In terms of the average signal strength, is that something you have training and experience on from the various cellular telephone providers?
Average signal strength. No.
So is there any determination or anything that can be made about distance from a tower just based on what cell site the phone or device was using?
No. From your call detail records, you cannot tell distance.
Yeah, whoever who said that in the chat, you're right. It's like CSI.
To this type of illustration.
Okay, so this is kind of showing. I'm going to skip this a little bit. Okay, here we go.
With coordinates on it.
Yes.
Is that again provided to you by the detective?
Yes.
Next, reported shooting. How would you identify that on the map and point it out, please?
So the reported shooting location is a blue flag with a little eye in it, shown here on the map, sort of, I guess.
So now he's applying everything he just explained to saying how he came up with this like route they drove.
Your next, how is that identified on the map?
You have Memorial Hospital, 1901 Southwest 172nd Avenue here in North Florida. It's shown on the map with a red square and a white H.
Okay. Next location is labeled as McDonald's. Where is that on the map?
McDonald's is 17001 Miramar Parkway, Miramar, Florida. That's shown with a red circle and a yellow M on it.
Okay. And Sunset Lakes is the next one. If you could point that out.
Sunset Lakes is located at 18513 Southwest 40th Street, Miramar, Florida. That's shown on the map with an orange flag that has the white letters S&L.
And so last but not least, the Montessori Academy.
Yes, the Montessori Academy, 19200 Pines Boulevard, Pembroke Pines, Florida. It's shown on the map with an orange flag that has the letters M and A in white.
Are those locations that we just discussed consistently plotted throughout the rest of the mapping that you do in the case?
Yes.
So I want to go to the phone number 772-713-9807 and then the phone number 954-248-9081. Do you know who either of those phone numbers belong to?
Objection, outside of the scope of knowledge.
Excuse me.
And hearsay.
Can I see his sidewalk, please?
They're still arguing about, yo, you cannot refer to this number as Melly's number. Let's keep it going now. They should be coming back. Here we go.
On that, I want to talk in the 954-248-9081. Between 3:20 a.m. and 3:57 a.m., did you analyze the data for both of those phones?
Yes.
And if you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what this data is showing and explain it to them.
Sure. So the several slides like this in the report. So I'll talk a little bit more about this first one just so everyone understands, which the slide says. At the top, it says the analysis of the two phone numbers that conducting analysis for. It says the time period that I'm analyzing, so October 26, 2018, 3:20 a.m. to 3:57 a.m. And then the bulk of the slide is the graphic, is the map. You see all the green dots all over the place. Those are T-Mobile towers, like we talked about before. And then you'll see that certain towers are highlighted with a circle showing that those are the towers that saw the phone. Some circles are red, some circles are blue, some circles are red with a blue perimeter around them.
And so I'm going to kind of zoom in up here on this top section, the 3:20 a.m. If you could just show some of the red with blue circles and then the blue and red on that.
Yeah, so there's an example of a red circle, and what that means is that you can call it, since it's hard sometimes to remember numbers, we'll just call it the red phone and the blue phone. So the red phone was seen by that tower, and that's why there's a red circle there. Here, the network saw the blue phone on that tower. Here's an example of a tower that saw both.
Judge, may we approach that bar, please?
Another side.
Phones associated with.
No.
Correct? You have the
Wrong with what she's showing.
ran along with the defendant. The witness is also present, the state's present. All right, so I don't understand. You're saying you didn't have this report?
So we got this report this morning while I was sitting in the courtroom. We don't have a printer here. So I asked the state to do the professional courtesy and give me a copy of the documents that she'd be using for this testimony. I'm trying to refer to it. She gave me 7 pages, by the way, which we started, and I was objecting to it being published because it still had the names in. She said, I'm not using that first page that I handed you. I'm using every other page. So I'm looking at the pages to try to go along with what she's showing. And I'm noticing she gave me a report from a whole nother phone. All I'm asking is to give us the actual documents that she's showing the witness. And to say I emailed it to you while we were sitting in the courtroom is a little disingenuous because I don't have the printer to be able to print it out. So I just asked.
So you have the report, all 3 reports, but the reports that you have that were generated to you have the phone number as well as a name that's identified that the phone is associated with. Is that correct?
She redacted that.
No, a little
Yes.
bit, but you have the 3 reports.
Yes.
Discussing the phones, and he was given those reports some time ago, and yesterday your objection was made that
I think this is his brother, right? This is his brother right here? B Slime? Or is it this? I know B Slime has some colored stuff in his hair. So one of these guys.
it's, it's conclusory as to whose phone
Did Whoa Vicky not show up today?
it was, and I sustained that objection, told her to redact the name.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And you're telling me you don't have the form of the reports with that redaction of these maps or whatever they are, with the names being redacted. Is that correct?
So I have it in email, but I'm asking for paper form so I can follow along. with-
Understood.
Yes,
All
that's
right.
exactly.
Thank you. So can you make copies for those?
I printed, I found all of them. If there's one that she's missing, I'm happy to do so and pull them up again. I printed them all this morning for her.
Council's suggesting she doesn't have them, so I just want to make sure she has
Of
them.
course, and that's not a problem. So, but they've all been turned over via email. This is all in there, the original copies as well that were provided.
Council does not have the ability to print something out in the courtroom now. She's asking, Council Raven Liberty is asking for a copy of it. Let's provide her a copy.
I'm happy to do so. I just need to know exactly which one she says she's missing and which one she says she has. I don't want to have to duplicate them if possible.
None of the documents she's published since
So just
testimony
do
started.
me a courtesy,
has been
print
given to me.
all of them out.
Okay.
Okay.
Digital forensic examiner.
Okay. What is a digital forensic examiner?
So what I do is we'll stick with the cell phones or cellular phones or devices.
This was previously, so I guess this is when they come back. Let's see. Right here.
That's right. Let's get back on the record. I understand, well, first of all, let the record reflect the presence of the defendant, his counsel, assistant state attorneys. We're still waiting for the state to provide certain documents to defense counsel, i.e. some maps that were being used as demonstratives. Counsel sidebar suggested that she didn't have them. They were emailed to her, but she doesn't have hard copies, and Raven Liberty wants the hard copies. So I had instructed the state attorney to go ahead and do that, provide those hard copies, and that's in the works because the printer in the courtroom doesn't seem to be working. So while we're waiting on that, let's go back and talk about the discovery cutoff that counsel suggested he wants. What's the state's position on the discovery cutoff?
That if there is anything that counsel brings up with regards to the witness that suggests additional analysis or anything that can be done, that the state would do it on that.
So you're opposing it.
Yes, sir.
Anything else that you want to be heard on regarding this discovery cutoff?
No,
Anything the defense wants to be heard?
Yes, sir. I just started to do some research, and quite frankly, I've only candidly found a case. It's in the 4th DCA, but it concerns a civil matter, and it speaks of the need for a discovery cutoff to avoid the very term I used, ambush and surprise, and that when a party conducts itself in a way as to ambush there to not to get the benefit of that. These trials we understand life goes on beyond trials. So the evidence that can be introduced into a trial should have some finite and determinable parameters. The notion that the state comes here and asks jurors to put somebody to death suggests that they have completed an investigation that warrants that co-signature. To suggest that, okay, there are a lot of things that we could have done and we didn't do, and if you ask about it, we're going to go do it and introduce it while the proceedings ensue, is not only an ambush, but it's an insult to the process. They're saying that they have the evidence. Now, the state can get up there and say, hey, the defense is making some ridiculous cross-examination and we don't have everything.
I'm thinking the jury's out of the room again.
Which,
Anytime they're having these little open court kind of like, motion arguments or whatever, usually the juror's out of the room.
beyond a reasonable doubt. But what they cannot do is, as these proceedings go forward, continue to investigate and plug holes that we reveal to exist as the process goes on until this case goes to verdict. I'm not quite sure when this would end or how there is even a gatekeeping function of the court if there is no gate and there is no fence and there are no lines and no parameters of propriety. The state is making a representation by bringing this indictment that they are ready and they have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And if that proof beyond a reasonable doubt also includes areas of investigation that were not pursued, then they should explain to a jury why it was not pursued and why the failure to pursue it does not undermine their case. They don't get to keep plugging holes as the proceedings go forward. And so, as the Fourth Circuit said, that is ambush. And the purpose of, the Fourth DCA said that is ambush. And the purpose of a discovery deadline is to avoid surprise, avoid ambush, and a party that engages in that ought not to get the benefit of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hold on.
Just briefly, I mentioned that defense hasn't yet to provide any reciprocal discovery, but alluded to some yesterday that they were looking at Instagram posts and everything that had happened as recently as this week, but yet they have provided nothing to the state. So if there's any deadline of any sort that needs to be imposed on both parties.
Thank you. Oh, Counsel, my understanding is that's the way it works, is that it's not, emergency violations apply to both sides, it doesn't apply to just one side. It's deadlines apply to both sides. And there's a obligation.
We apologize. The printers decided to start working. Let's work on it. I'm sorry.
I apologize. What I was saying is that whatever obligations that are imposed would be applicable to both sides when there's a discovery cutoff or not. My thought is as to the discovery cutoff, you can keep investigating the case however you feel fit, and you're more than welcome to do that. However, that doesn't mean that anything you find can be used at trial as evidence. This thing with Mr. Moretti, where when I'm out of town on vacation, you're asking the detective, or he's offering, I'm not really sure how it happened, to continue and run this through another process, and the defense doesn't know about it. The defense cross-examines Mr. Zellner, or Officer Zellner, and is not aware that he's asking questions about other programs, because his understanding is there isn't any other program. But you know there's another program, they have access to it, and they've done it, you just don't have the results. That seems to me to be what the counsel's talking about. And that seems to me to be a Richardson violation. There's a discovery that's ongoing, you know about it, and you're not telling them about it until we're here in court. So as far as I'm already is concerned, I think that's a discovery violation. And I'm finding it to be a discovery violation. I just think the only way it can be cured is he's not going to testify about this second procedure that happened. That's not coming in. Same thing. If you want to keep investigating the case, you can do it. You can find exculpatory information. You may change your mind as to how you proceed with the case, and I don't have a problem. You can investigate whatever you want to investigate. But as far as using new discovery that you're coming in, I think a cutoff needs to be happened, because this is what's going on. We're going to have this. If you find something new, there's a whole, as counsel describes it, that and you try to find evidence to plug up the hole that's new discovery. The defense doesn't have an opportunity to depose the witness. The defense doesn't have an opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. And that's just not the way it should be. It shouldn't be done by surprise. So
it's clear this was not a new item. This was just this. All of the information was told to be identical.
you found it. You had a meeting with the detective in May when we're in hiatus because I'm on vacation. All right. You got a meeting with him in May after we picked a jury, and when we're ready to, or we're in the middle of jury selection. You picked it. You did it, and you said, well, he tells you, or you ask him, do you have more, programs to go ahead and provide the information, and you find out there's another program, and he runs the program, does a different download with something other than Cellbrite, and therefore, you have more information. Don't make the defense aware of it. You hold that to yourself. You go ahead and put on a couple weeks of trial testimony, and then when it comes up after he, in cross-examination, points something out, you bring it up and say, well, by the way, I told him, the detective in our pretrial meeting, it came up and he has the program and we can use it and we're doing it, all right? And but you don't tell him about it. You just go ahead and hold it, keep it close to the vest yourself. Don't explain it to him, and then you say, when it comes up at trial, I say, what was it? I don't have the report yet. That's why I didn't turn it over to him, but didn't disclose it's coming. It seems to me that's not what's supposed to happen. Not supposed to happen, period. That's a discovery violation. Okay? So, as far as the Detective Moretti, and whatever other form he used, that's not coming in.
Okay.
All right? That's the sanction. If you have other information, other discovery that's in the works, you better share it with them, because right now, if you don't have it, they're not aware of it now. It's not coming in unless there's something extraordinary that pops up. And just because, you find out they have additional capabilities and you want to go retest something, that's not extraordinary on my way of thinking. I'm not familiar with what the case law says. It just seems to me that this is a fundamental fairness thing. You have evidence, you need to turn it over to him. If you didn't turn it over to him, you can't use it. That's really the basic.
Understood, Your Honor. And so everything has been turned over. That was the only item of which there was additional investigation done on to see if there was any other information or anything else that came out. It was reported to me that it was identical in terms of the information that was done through Gray Key versus Celebrite on that. So defense counsel is attacking the veracity of the Celebrite program on that. So with regards to that, that's the only reason why that would even be brought up. But if I understand there, so we can move forward on that. But I do want to address one other issue, more outside the presence of the jury. Counsel keeps objecting to publishing of items that are already in evidence and making speaking objections. So I just ask if Your Honor could address that specific issue, because the state can publish the items that are in evidence in the presentation of their case, and defense can object if there's something that has not been admitted or something to that effect. But in terms of the speaking objections and things like that, those are improper in front of the jury.
Thank you. All right, no speaking objections.
Understood.
When do you expect this documentation to come over?
I think the printer just started working.
And I provided it to Ms. Liberty.
Do you have those, Ms. Liberty?
Yes, confirmed, Judge.
All right, you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Defense,
Yes, sir.
bring the jury in.
It's a good thumbnail right here. This is like the Lil Durk and Young Thug staring at the computer meme.
Jurors entering.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. Let the record once again reflect the presence of the jury as well as defendants, defendants, this counsel, the state attorneys. Our witness remains on the stand. Counsel, you can continue with your direct examination.
Okay, so we had left off, you were talking about the red phone and the blue phone. And just to remind the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what is the red phone number?
So it is listed at the top of the slide. It is 772-713-9807.
And then the blue phone number?
The blue phone number is 954-248-9081.
Okay, so going back, you have a little green box with the numbers 154-129-11. What is that?
That is the name of the tower and the sector.
Okay. And the times that are listed below, what are those indicative of?
So there's a time that says 3:20 a.m. in blue, and it says 3:20 a.m. in red, and that is the time from the records that the blue phone and the red phone each respectively connected to that tower.
So based on what you're showing here, what can you tell us about where the blue phone and the red phone were at 3:20?
So generally in the area around New Era Studios.
Okay. As you're moving across the slide, what are we looking at?
So we see a series of towers that the red phone and or blue phone were observed by as they move from east to west. So you see there's a line of towers generally in this area, kind of along 595, down I-75, and then the last ones at the end of the slide are the west, kind of by the intersection of a tower that's near the intersection of Pines and US 27. The tower is 63035, sector 15 at 3:57 a.m. That tower saw each of these phones.
So I want to make sure it's clear when you're the 3:20 a.m. that's on the right side of the screen. Can you kind of show in order the way the towers are plotted?
Yeah, so I didn't know the time for each tower because then it would be just a mess of boxes on the slide. But generally, these towers in the northeast, and then sequentially or chronologically as time went on, these towers were used. This tower was used later than that tower, and this tower, and then that tower. And so as time went on, from 320 closer to 357, these towers were used.
And based on your training and experience, what does that tell you about how the phones were moving in relation to one another between 3:20 and 3:57 a.m.?
Yeah, so in my opinion, that's consistent with devices moving generally together.
Okay. So you mentioned that there are some in which there is red and blue together. So I want to focus in. There's one here. It looks like at the intersection of Flamingo Road and I-75. And
Yes.
595 rather. The red with the blue. What does that mean when you have them overlaid like that?
So that tower saw both the red phone and the blue phone.
Okay. Is that at the same time, or are they at separate times?
Could be either.
So going on to the phone of the 772-713-9807, what are we looking at this slide titled 3:47 a.m.?
So this is a plot of timing advanced data, and it shows that 2 data points basically from the engineering report. The tower 64337 sector 2 that's pointed south recorded the red phone had 2 data points, one at 3:47:13 a.m., one at 3:47:24 a.m. And the measurement that went up was that phone at those times was 0.24 miles from the tower.
So you said it's 2 different times, but it's the same measurement. How do you explain that to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
That's just what the records recorded.
Okay. And in terms of by having 2 data points along, are they going to be in the same exact spot?
Well, I mean, it could be or it could not be. So the 0.24 miles from the tower is this red arc here. And I guess your question is the phone in the same spot or not? I don't know. Those are 2 data points close in time. They're separated by 11 seconds, so the phone certainly could be stationary. The phone could also be moving. For instance, at one point it could be here, and at the other point it could be there. They're both possibilities, and you can't determine from this data.
And in terms of you don't have any cameras if it's stuck at a red light or anything like that?
I don't.
Okay. So that was the 772-713-9807 at 3:47 a.m. Okay. Moving on to the 772-713-9807 from 3:52 to 3:53 a.m. Could you explain what you're illustrating and the data shows on this slide?
Okay, so this shows 2 data points, both using the same tower and sector, tower 151-685, sector 13. And the first data point is at 3:52:58 a.m.
Okay.
That's this arc here. That's 0.58 miles from the tower. And then 50 seconds later, at 3:53:48 a.m., the arc is 1.16 miles from the tower, this other arc.
And in terms of the distance between the 2 arcs, what is that amount?
It's a little bit over half a mile,
And the time frame in between those 2 arcs is how long?
about 50 seconds.
Based on the records and that you have, can you give information as to where that phone was along those arcs?
Based on the records that I have,
Yes. Based on other additional information that was provided to you, can you make a determination as to where it's more likely than not the phone was?
yes.
And where is that?
So the phone moved half a mile in 50 seconds. That's consistent with vehicle travel. It's too fast for a phone to run. That's 30 miles an hour. So there's a couple places that the phone could be logically. For instance, it could be going east to west on Pines. It could be going north to south on 184th. Those both options. There's a data point that was provided to me. And that reason for this analysis was I was asked, hey, the detective recovered some video footage from Montessori Academy that he believed these devices might be in a vehicle that was seen driving by around this time. The detective asked, is the cell data consistent with these devices being in the vehicle? In my opinion, yes.
Okay. The data points that we're looking at, are those the only data points that exist in this case?
No, but these are the data points between 352 and 353.
Okay. So going on to now the 772-713-9807 and 954-248-9081. The 4 a.m. to 4:03 a.m. Can you describe what information is contained here?
So both phones are seen in the same tower and sector. Tower 63035, sector 15. At 4 o'clock and 36 seconds, the blue phone was 1.45 miles from the tower. We have 2 data points on the red phone. One at 4 a.m. 54 seconds, one at 4:14 seconds. The red phone was reported being 1.5 miles from the tower and 1.45 miles from the tower.
So when we're looking at here, this purple area, why is that?
Because the red and blue phones are both, they are red, blue mixed purple, so.
Just in case anyone's colorblind. So, with regards to the locations along this arc, can you narrow down in any way where the phones are along that arc?
Now, from the cell records, all you can tell is that there's somewhere within. Yeah.
And in terms of if you're looking at it in the totality of the circumstances based on the other records and information that you have, can that help and assist you in rendering an opinion as to where the phones are located?
Yes.
And where would that be?
So, the red flag depicts the crime scene that the detectives told me about, and they asked, is it possible for these devices to have been in the crime scene? In my opinion, yes. The data is consistent, includes devices being in the area of the crime scene at this time.
Okay. So going on to the 772-713-9807 phone at 4:06 a.m.
Yo, sewer.
What
Pause, my
information
nigga.
or data are you showing here?
So this shows the red phone at 4:06:22. There's a data point where it's back on tower 63047, sector 3. It's 1.02 miles from the tower. So in this band here.
Okay, and in terms of where it is along that band, can you give a more definitive answer?
From the cell phone records alone, no. The reason for this slide, this analysis, was because the detective had video footage from Montessori Academy again at a certain time.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sorry, repeat your question.
So based on these records, can you say where the phone was along that band?
And your objection is it calls for hearsay?
I wasn't listening to the question, Judge.
Thank you. Proceed. You can answer the question.
So based on these records, can you say where along the band it was?
No.
Was other physical evidence provided for you to review?
I don't think I saw physical evidence, no.
Okay. So going on to the next slide, the 772-713-9807 and 954-248-9081. If you can explain what we're looking at on this particular slide.
So this is a series of data points on 3 different hours for both the red and blue phone between 4:17 and 4:23. We're starting back on the left side of the slide, where 4:17:43, the blue phone is 1.21 miles from this tower. Shortly after that, at 4:18:02 a.m., the red phone is 0.87 miles from the tower. Shortly after that, 4:20:50 a.m., the blue phone is 1.02 miles from this tower. Then after that, at 4:23:22 and 4:23:55 a.m., the red phone is 0.29 miles and then 0.68 miles from this tower.
Okay, and in terms of what can you tell about how the phones are related in distance from one another based on this slide?
Distance from one another. Well, both phones moved north and then east. We know that the blue phone and the red phone are both over here, and now they're over here towards the end of the period.
Can you have an opinion as to whether or not they separated during this time frame?
During this time frame,
Yes, 4:17 to 4:23.
I don't know. To me, I don't think there's enough data here to form either way.
Okay. So going on to the blue phone, 954-248-9081 4:40 a.m. to 5:52 a.m. What data points and what information do you have on that phone?
So there's a lot of data points, or many data points for the blue phone during this time period. All the timing advance bands were either 0.82 or 0.87 miles from the tower, Tower 62492, Sector 3. Each of those bands, the 0.82 miles and 0.87 miles are shown here.
Okay. Does that phone then, that's all the data that you have for that particular blue phone?
Right.
Okay. Now to go to the 4:40 a.m. for the 772-713-9807, where does your data show that phone to be in the area of?
So at 4:40 a.m., at this point, the phones are clearly separate. At 4:40 a.m., we have two different types of data points that were plotted here. At 4:40:31, we have the timing advance data, which shows that the phone is 0.5 to 8 miles from this tower. And then at 4:40:34 a.m., the red phone makes an outgoing call using that cell site for that tower in Sector 62407, Sector 12.
Okay, and the outgoing phone call that is made, is that identified from the records?
Yes.
And what is that? I'm sorry.
That is a outgoing call to phone number 954-376-9158.
Okay. Does the red phone ever coincide again
Oh, sorry.
with the blue phone on the same arc that covers the hospital?
No.
Basically,
So that was
they're
the
showing
first.
when Melly's supposed to leave the car. They're showing the time.
Did you do additional ones?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to move on to the sprint at records and analysis that you did. Council, you're clear which one? So with the sprint records that you were given, did you have the same measurement or distance data for those phones?
No, we had a similar report, which is the timing advance. Sprint calls it per call measurement data report. It's formatted differently. It's a different network, it's a different company, but it has generally the same types of information contained in the report.
Okay. If there was going to be a distance in this report, where would it be shown?
It would be shown in column I.
Column I,
Yeah, just titled distance in miles.
distance miles there. Okay. And to be clear, we're looking at the records here for 954-371-7895. Did Sprint provide the distance for column I at any point between 3 a.m. and 3:57 a.m.? Sorry, that's column 163. Was there any distance provided?
No.
Okay. The 164 column, or row 164, row 60, 166, 167, and 169 was distance provided by Sprint at that point.
Yes.
Are they from a different manufacturer or vendor of cell tower?
Yes.
Okay. So based on, and so on this, the state would also publish what's been previously admitted as State 63. And for the record, that is the 2018-221418-6155597 customer service management screen of Chris Thomas. And the second one to be published is the customer service
Objection,
management screen of Dontavius.
That's the objection.
May we approach?
Sure.
I'm not sleeping, chat. Like I'm handling some business on text. Y'all might think I'm like just low energy or whatever because I'm looking down. I'm looking at my phone. I'm like sending text through and shit like that. I'm sorry.
For instance,
It's labeled as page 3. You're still using the same symbol.
Don't worry. Once we get past this boring shit, it's gonna pick up a little bit. Also, you know, I'll talk about the young boy shit. The little bit more info on the Quando Rondo stuff. So I'll get to those things, but you know, let's prioritize the trial for now. All right, they're gonna take lunch pretty soon if they're not at lunch already. We just want to catch up. Yeah. So yeah, we just need to get to about here, which is about like 20 more minutes of this, and then like I'll be talking from then on. All right.
The circle to represent a tower.
yes.
Okay. Are you still using the same wedge or pie shape to identify a specific cell site?
Yes.
As to the next image that we're looking at, what does this show?
This shows the Sprint network in South Florida in the time of October 2018.
Does this fairly and accurately depict how the cell towers for Sprint were situated in October of 2018?
Yes.
God damn.
And we previously discussed the locations of interest. Are those the same as in the previous analysis that you did?
Yes.
Why don't you put these all on one giant map together?
All the phones.
Yes.
Well, one, it would be a lot of phones. It could be like confusing to look at to see all the different data points. And then, so that was one of the reasons why.
Oh. So going on to the phone number, the 772-713-2341, the green phone on this, and 954-371-7895. Can you explain what we're looking at of this October 26th, 3:22 to 3:43 a.m.?
So, much like the red and the blue phone, this shows that the green and the purple phone both use towers or seen by towers in the Fort Lauderdale area near the flag with the NE unit. It represents New Era Studios. At 3:22 a.m., the purple tower seen by Sprint Tower 168.845, and then at 3:23 a.m., the green phone by a different tower, 325.911.
Okay. And in terms of, to go back to the 772-713-9807 and 248-9081, you're showing the same or similar time frames.
Yes.
Okay. Do the phones, the green and the purple phone, move consistently together during this time frame?
During this time frame, yes.
Okay. And how can you say that?
The towers, again, advancing chronology, consistent with the phones moving together, generally south, and then west, and then south again. They were hitting the same towers at similar times through this point.
Moving on to now 3:43 to 3:57 a.m. What are you showing and illustrating on this slide?
So this is only the purple phone. And you'll see that there are several towers that saw the purple phone during this time period. Unfortunately, because we didn't get distance information in the report, we can't tell where, in relation to those towers, this device is. So you'll see that there's overlap between the towers, right? Like for instance, between 3:43 and 3:52, there were multiple times that this tower saw the phone. But during that time period, this tower also saw the phone at 3:48. During that time period, this tower also saw the phone at 3:49. 3:50, this tower saw it. So we have multiple towers from all different locations where the antennas are generally pointing that direction that saw the phone, but we don't have distance information.
Are there any phone calls or anything that would indicate that the phone used one of those towers as the clearest, strongest signal to make a phone call?
No.
Then going on to the 772-713-2341. Is this using some of the same towers?
Some of them.
Okay, and if we can just kind of go back and forth a little bit to explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury which ones are the same and which ones are different.
Sure. So I believe all three of these are the same, but the purple ones, or the purple phone, had multiple other towers that were used.
Okay. To look at tower 336234-3. I'm trying to overlay them as, are they using the same antenna on that tower?
No.
Okay. Is this consistent with the phones being together?
No, in my opinion, this shows that the phones were separated.
So, and then in terms of the final analysis at 3:49 a.m., if you could, for the 772-713-2341 tower, if you could identify that on this exhibit, which is page 9.
The tower that recorded the phone at 349,
Yes.
this one in the center, tower 3360972.
Okay. And then in terms of the final tower, the 3:57 a.m., if you could identify that one.
That's the western edge of the map area, tower 336-234, sector 3.
Okay. So, going on to the third analysis you did in this case. Did you do an analysis again for the phone number 772-713-9807, the red phone, and 954-376-9158?
Yes.
And in terms of the 954-376-9158, is that the same phone number you testified to was the phone call at 4:40 a.m. and on the 772 phone?
Yes.
Okay. So going on to those, you again use the same information to depict timing advance and cell sites and everything of that nature.
Yes.
The two phones, is it important to know what network a phone is on before you do the mapping?
Yes.
Okay. Were both of these phones on the same network?
Yes.
On this
Look at these
particular
cell
one,
towers.
what network?
Look at these cell. No wonder T-Mobile was so fucking trash in 2018. Look, all East Coast. So if you in the middle here, you're not fucking with T-Mobile at all. Period. Then pretty much a lot of West Coast, but it looked like it's just way heavier in the East Coast. God damn.
Network were both phones on?
T-Mobile.
Okay, so back to the red phone. And are these, again, fairly and accurately depict the location of the T-Mobile towers of October of 2018?
Yes.
Same locations of interest, or is there an additional one on this particular item?
There's an additional one.
And what item or additional location is on this map that is different from the others?
The Toscana Apartments, 5700 Toscana Lane, Margate, Florida. It's shown with on the map with an orange flag with a white letter T on it.
And if you could just circle it so it's clear to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury where that's at.
Here's on the map. Here's the actual location.
Everything else remains the same?
Yes.
Okay. So on the 954-376-9158, the kind of turquoise phone, what information are you showing from 1:08 a.m. to 8:23 a.m.?
So this is information from the call detail records. It's not engineering data. This is calls and texts. And it shows that between 1:08 a.m. and 8:23 a.m., there are several calls and texts at the phone, to and from the phone, using two different sectors of the same tower, shown here with two different wedges.
And so based on your training experience, do you have an opinion as to where that phone was from 1:08 to 8:23 a.m.?
Yeah, so generally in the area, just kind of apartments.
Moving on to October 26, 2018, from 12:01 p.m. to 12:12 p.m. on this turquoise phone, the 954-376-9158. What information are you mapping here?
So here we're showing both the engineering data, the time in advance information, as well as information from the call detail records. So first, 1201 and 1202, the phone, turquoise phone, is in these two bands here. First, this one is a little closer to the tower, it's 0.63 miles away, and then the second band is 0.73 miles from the tower. During that time period also, at 1201:39, the turquoise phone places an outgoing call to the red phone, 9807.
So then the next time frame that you're mapping on this location is what?
It's 1205, when the time in advance measurement that's recorded is 1.02 miles from this tower, south of it.
Okay. Going on.
Yo, Chad, I can't wait till this shit is done, nigga. We got some shit to talk about, man. Yeah, I can't. But let me get back to this.
To 120607 to 121237.
So during that time frame, there's measurements from two different sectors of the same tower. So we see on the one hand that there's arcs here that are either 1.45 and 1.5 miles from the tower.
Okay.
But also during that time period, we have measurements from a different side of that tower. They're 1.5 and 1.55 miles from the tower.
Okay. And in terms of the location, is there anything you can say with specificity as to where that phone was at 1207?
No, I mean, I think that I would generally look for the phone to be someplace where the arcs are overlaid, or an area where it would be seen by both sectors, but no, you can't in isolation your point.
Do the cell phone towers overlap in their sectors?
Yes, they do.
Oh. Going on to October 26, 1214 to 1220 a.m., the 954-376-9158 phone number, the turquoise phone. What are we looking at in this image?
So, starting down here, south on US 27, or excuse me, on the tower near the area of Pines of US 27, it's pointed south. At 12:14, 14 p.m., the band is 1.45 miles from the tower. Then a few seconds later, it's 1.21 miles from the tower. It's getting closer. A few seconds later, it's 0.97 miles.
All right, let's pause this fucking geography class for a second. The XXL magazine, their freshman list this year just dropped. All right, using these phones. He received phone calls, and also when he was traveling, if you guys don't know, your phone consistently sends out tiny bits of data to make sure it's connected, and it finds the nearest cell tower and how long it takes to bounce back. It keeps a record of it, which is it takes up this amount of space. Well, not this amount, but like very small amount of space, and they could read that later to kind of track you. Okay, so that's what they're doing.
And then 0.48 miles from the tower. Then it's in this band on a different sector, but perhaps still closer to the tower, traveling the same direction, 0.63 miles. And then to the north, 1.1 and 1.6 miles from the tower.
And so in terms of the north to south distance of each of these bands, how wide are they? If we're looking at the north to south, aspect between here and here, what type of, remind ladies and gentlemen, what is this still on a 4G phone?
Yes, yeah. So each of those arcs is still 78 meters deep.
Okay. Based on the multiple locations that you have, do you have an opinion as to how that phone or handset was traveling?
Yeah, I think the data is consistent with the phone traveling south and north during that time.
Now going on to the 772-713-9807 between 12:01 and 12:12 p.m. on October 26th of 2018. What are you illustrating with this particular image?
So at 12:01, first there's an incoming call from the turquoise phone 9158. And then at 1201, the red phone is this band, 0.92 miles from the tower. At 1203, it's 0.68 miles from the tower. At 1205, it's 0.92 miles from the tower. And then 1207 to 1212, it's 1.55 miles from the tower.
Okay, and just to flip back again to the 1201 to 1212 for the 954-376-9158. In terms of, can you make any opinions as to where these two phones were located in relation to one another during these time frames?
So they're in the same general geographic area for sure. Right? They're both on the same tower, at the same time, near Pines and US 27. There's areas where there's times when their bands are approximately the same, and there's times where they're different as well.
Okay. Can you make any sort of opinion that they were in the same vehicle?
No.
Going on to the 772-713-9807 phone from October 26, 2018, from 12:14 p.m. to 12:21 p.m. What data are you illustrating in this particular slide?
So the first data point, 12:14:47, is this band here. It's 1.02 miles from this tower. The next one, 12:16:28, is this band here, 0.92 miles from the tower. Then continuing on in time, at 12:18:08 p.m., the red phone's in this band, 0.92 miles from the tower. And then at 12:18:28, 0.68 miles from the tower. And then finally at 12:21:17, it's 0.29 miles from this tower.
And in terms of that was the end of the mapping and cellular analysis that you were asked to do in this case.
Yes.
Do all of the maps fairly and accurately represent your testimony that you just gave?
Yes.
In terms of, we talked a little bit about cell phone signal and things like that. Does being in a parking garage or being at elevation change your analysis of where the phones would be?
Being a part of the elevation change. I mean, I don't think so. No.
If there was something that was a red flag in the data, what do you do to catch that?
Well, if I see a red flag for whatever reason, something that doesn't make sense, I'm going to look at it much more closely. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is the issue? Is there an issue?
Was there any such information or issues that in the records that you looked at in this case?
No.
Can you ever say why a phone picks a particular tower or doesn't pick a different one?
Yes. So if we're talking about making a call or sending a text, and then from the call detail records, the phone picks the tower based on its readings of signal strength and signal quality. The phone always picks the tower with the clearest, strongest signal. If we're talking about the engineering data, what the network sees, why the network reports the distance measurement from one tower instead of another, no, I don't know why.
In terms of, can you tell whether or not a specific tower was working on the evening in question?
If there's a record associated with that tower, it was working on the evening.
There's other mapping software that's available. Does the FBI use a specific mapping software when doing this?
Yeah, we have a couple different programs. I used one program,
Okay, and what is that?
ESPA.
What is that specifically?
ESPA is a program for cell site data.
Why do you use that specific program?
It's the tool, one of the tools that we have, and they meet our needs or requirements as an agency.
In terms of just plugging the latitude and longitude into Google Maps, is that something you can testify to based on those records?
Yes.
And do you use that and those latitude and longitude that are in that timing advance data to determine where the phone was?
So I didn't use the latitude longitude to produce that report. Could I use them? Could I plot them in ESPA or Google Maps and look at them? Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Why don't you rely on them?
I don't rely on them when I'm doing my expert testimony because I don't understand all the factors that go into the network driving that estimated location for the device. For investigative leads or something, if I'm looking for a kit, of course I'm making my report for expert testimony. I use the time in advance to understand the math.
And in terms of, is the math constant?
Yes.
Do you take into account, you mentioned the UTC time versus local time. Do you take that into account in all the records when you're looking at those?
Yes.
Does the power of the antenna or cell site affect your analysis on the speed of light and the distance from the tower for each cell phone?
No.
Okay. Can you explain what is tower loading?
Tower loading. Like when a tower gets overloaded?
Correct.
Okay. So towers have, finite capacity. There's, not unlimited network resources for a phone company. So generally, you're able to make calls or text whenever you want, right? Like towers generally don't get overloaded, but it is possible for towers to get overloaded. So the way you see that, I guess, would be one, if you're trying to make a call. If you ever experienced the phenomenon where you're looking at your phone, like say it would have to be an event where there's a ton of phones, like an unexpected, unanticipated influx of devices and people, like say the Super Bowl or something like that, and there's just an incredible demand for network resources. Everybody's trying to Facebook Live or make calls, take video, everything. So if you've ever been in a situation where you're looking at your phone and you see, man, I had like great service, I have 4 bars, but I try and place a call, and the call just won't go through. It's because the towers could be because the towers are overloaded and you just can't handle your call.
Okay, and in terms of, would that be something that the phone would be able to see in the phone records?
No, so if the tower is overloaded, the phone won't know that it's overloaded, right? The phone can't see or doesn't have a view into what the network is handling, which is why your phone has identified a particular antenna as the one that offers the clearest, strongest signal. It says you've got 4 bars from this antenna, this is the one I'm going to connect to. It doesn't know that antenna is overloaded, and so that's why when you have 4 bars, you hit send to try to make a call, the call just doesn't connect, it just won't go through. The phone doesn't know, oh, I should be looking for an extra antenna someplace. All it knows is that's my antenna.
And if there's no records or no entry in the records, can you analyze any of that data?
No, obviously I only am able to analyze the data that I have data points for.
In terms of the mapping and everything that you created, is it a fair and accurate depiction of the cell phone data and records that you just specified to?
Yes.
Does it in terms of as you're creating it, are you creating it as an expert in cell phone data and mapping?
Yes.
Do you do validation and verification of the data and the information that you're relying on?
So, through my training experience, I know that the time in advance data is very accurate. And we talked about that earlier or yesterday, where it's like have real life validation for it. Like, yes, I've done historic cell site analysis, had it validated by finding the phone in the place where I expected it to be, or seeing video of the person with the device at that point in time.
All right. Here, if we may approach Shankar.
Here we go.
QQQ, RRR, and SSS. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and they were admitted into evidence. What's the,
States QQQ will be 65, states RRR will be 66, and states SSS will be 67.
thank you. Counsel Jury, you may proceed.
Thank you. Okay. Special Agent Collins, I want to go through on some of the timing advance records. And just so for the purposes of what we're talking about.
By the way, chat, little update for y'all. YNW Juvie's dad will be on here tomorrow. He feels he has valuable input and context to give around the trial. He reached out to me. He said, "I see you're covering the murder trial, including the death of my son. I'm down to talk to you. I'm down to give you some explanation." So that's for tomorrow. But yeah, we're still kind of getting through this. By the way, I don't think any of the family is gonna testify though, because I don't think none of them were that close to the situation. But I guess the family has some type of context how things were right before, right after the death, obviously, and then how things are now. All right. So somebody said do it after the trial. Well, I mean, we'll talk to all parties at any time.
Row 139, 140, 141, 142, and 143 of the 772-713-9807 phone records. The latitude and longitude you mentioned, and this would be covering the times from 3:48 a.m. through 3:52 a.m. You indicated that the latitude and longitude are the first columns that are put there. And then the next column, column C, is called confidence.
Yes.
What does the confidence column modify?
It refers to columns A and B.
So is there a numerical value that's assigned to the low, high, and medium data entries in column C, the confidence?
So confidence, it refers to, like, that's T-Mobile's determination based on the number of data points that they have used to derive or estimate the device's location with that latitude and longitude, refers to, or gives it confidence level like low, medium, or high based on the number of data points, basically.
And in terms of, do you use that in any way, shape, or form to testify to where you are placing the phone in your analysis?
No.
Okay. The question as to the difference between accuracy and precision. Can you explain that?
Sure. So precise, I guess, would be much more narrow. In other words, the latitude and longitude, what we were just talking about, like that is incredibly precise. That refers to like a particular point on Earth. But it may not be completely accurate. Like there could be a margin of error in it. So, for instance, if there's a margin of error that says, okay, like I'm giving you a precise point, a particular latitude and longitude coordinates, but my margin of error is 800 meters, well, that might not be very accurate. What you're saying is it's somewhere within an 800 meter in radius of this latitude and longitude point. So, I guess precise would be very small. Accurate, whether it's reliable or not. In other words, like a cell site used by the phone to make a call, for instance, that's not a very precise area. We're talking about a general coverage area of an antenna. But it's completely accurate. There's no denying that is the cell site that the phone saw as the cell sector that gave it the clearest, strongest signal. So it's very, very accurate, but it's not very precise. It's the size of the coverage area.
Okay. And so last but not least, from the state would just be publishing part of State 64. The the top number, the 954-376-9158, is that the cell phone that you did the analysis on? One of them?
It's one of them, yes.
One of the phone numbers?
Yes.
For the record, publishing part of State 64, contact list for the phone number 954-376-9158 from the phone extraction 772-713-9807. No further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. You have any cross-examination?
I do have a cross-examination, Judge. If you remember before court, I had asked that we take a break before.
Oh, yes. That's it. Why don't you come side by side?
It's on lunchtime.
All right, we're gonna skip forward. Here we go.
The surprise
Okay, I think it came back.
case in chief.
Or outside the car during the
C times time.
Here we go. So now it should be across.
Moment, jury was taking a lunch. But while we wait, why don't we listen to some testimony from a detective, Jonathan Zeller, with the Miramar Police Department that occurred yesterday in a courtroom. And it's important because the prosecution...
And
Cast as a collateral.
Hi, welcome back to the Law and Crime Network. As you know, I'm Linda Kenny Bodden. We're expecting trial in the YNW Melly case to begin any moment. Jury was taking a lunch. But while we wait...
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Please be seated. Let the record once again reflect the presence of the defendant, Mr. Devins, his counsel, assistant state attorneys, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, and our witness, Brandon Collins, remains on the stand. Ladies and gentlemen, I just had a nice lunch. When we broke, counsel had not yet had an opportunity to commence her cross-examination of this witness, so we're going to turn it over to the defense now. Counsel, if you're ready, you may proceed.
thank you, Judge. Good afternoon, Agent Collins.
Good afternoon, Ms. Liberty.
Nice to see you in person. The last time we met, I think it was over Zoom.
Yes.
And last time we met, you actually told us you were working for the terrorism squad section of the FBI.
The transnational organized crime.
Okay, and that's where you learned the CAS report stuff as a collateral duty, correct?
No, I started doing cast as collateral duty when I was a special agent working gangs, part of our State Street's gang unit. And then I started doing terrorism investigations as my primary job and continued doing CAS as a collateral duty. Then I did CAS full-time in DC as a supervisor. Then I got promoted to field supervisor, which is my current job. I do that exclusively.
So you're still supervising organized crime?
Yes.
So do you do any of the CAS work with the organized crime?
No.
So do you know, if you know, when's the last time you actually did a CAS report? An actual one for an actual case, when's the last time?
This would be, so I kept all the cases that I had done previously that had been adjudicated.
Okay.
I have not taken new cases since becoming a supervisor.
And just curious, from the last time we spoke, which was about a year ago to now, has anything changed with the technology that we should be aware of? Right. So you had testified earlier talking about timing exams, and you said with T-Mobile they call that true data, correct?
Timing advance is the principle where the network is able to calculate the distance from a tower. T-Mobile has a brand called TrueCall that they use to do that.
And who within T-Mobile would do the TrueCall? Is that engineers? Who would know that information?
I don't know.
I'm going to put up your report. I'm looking at this band.
Hold on a second. You want that?
Oh, I do. Sorry.
Thank you, Gary.
All right, so this is your report, and we have this band here that kind of looks like, I know last time you called a hot dog, I like to call it like macaroni, but what does this band represent?
That is the timing advance band. So the engineering report, the true call report from T-Mobile would say the distance from the tower is 0.24 miles. And so then based on the timing advance measurement, which in 4G is 78 meters, that band is 78 meters deep, so it would be plus or minus 39 from 2.4 miles on either side.
So plus or minus, so it's an estimated distance, correct?
Yes.
All right. How does T-Mobile determine, I think you testified earlier that T-Mobile determines the distance by speed times time equals distance, correct?
Yes.
All right. And how fast does that signal travel?
At the speed of light.
All right. And you had testified earlier that the speed of light is a static number, correct?
Yes.
However, I tried to do the math myself because I think I'm really smart. And one of the things that I came across when I was looking at the speed of light was that it could actually be a 3 times 10 to the 8th power meters per second, or the actual number is 2.99792458 times 10 to the 8th power. So if you know, is T-Mobile using the higher number of the 3 or using the actual number with the speed of light?
I don't know.
Okay. But you would agree when we're dealing with the meters per second, that could actually be a big distance, correct?
Yeah, so obviously the bigger the distance or the bigger the time, then the more significant the difference between those two numbers would be, yes.
And just curious, would that estimate, because we talk a lot about sectors and I'll get further into it, is it possible that that estimate would change what sector you're paying off of?
It's possible estimate change.
Well, let me ask you this,
No.
because if we're dealing with a meter, if we're dealing with a meter, it's 3 feet 3 inches, correct?
Yeah.
And if I'm off by 4 or 5 meters, we're talking about like 15 feet basically, correct? A little bit more than 15 feet.
Yeah, so I guess at some point there always has to be a transition from one sector to the other, because they have multiple sectors. So on the sector boundary, could that change? I guess, yeah, there's a possibility for that for sure.
Okay. Can you do this calculation yourself?
Which calculation?
The calculation of the speed times time equals distance. Can you do that math yourself
Yes, I can.
by hand? And would you include timestamps when you did that calculation?
So I didn't do that calculation for this report. I used the distance that was in the engineering records that T-Mobile gave it produced. If they gave me the time, and we could use either 3.0 or 2.99, whatever the other number that you said was for the speed of light, I can do math if that was your question. But for this report, I did not do that math to produce these distances.
Okay. So can you tell me about any publication that would tell us about these expected accuracy of the timing advance records?
Nope.
All right. You haven't. So in your map, throughout your map, you talk about these bands and the distance from the tower. Is there any publications or any other data that you have that would explain how accurate that is?
No.
Do you know of any scientific testing outside of the legal community as to this whole cell tower stuff?
I mean, the cellular community, because this is an important part of how cell phones work on a cellular network.
Okay.
But apart from that, no.
Okay. And you show that band as a plus or minus 10 miles, correct? Is that the width of it?
No, it's 78 meters.
All right. And could you break that down? How big would that be? If you were to compare, like, would that be a football field, 2 football fields?
No, it's less than a football field, slightly less than a football field.
So slightly less, like 3/4 of a football field?
Something like that.
And do you have any factual basis that would back that up?
Factual basis for what 78 meters is?
Yeah. No, well, the distance, the approximation of the span. Do you have anything that would back that up?
As to why it's 78 meters?
Yeah.
Because that's what based on how the technology works, based on 4G, that's what the timing advance is. I mean, that's just what it is.
So did T-Mobile tell you this in your training, or how did you figure it out?
Yeah, through my training experience, not T-Mobile specifically, but I mean, that's for regardless of whether it's T-Mobile or Verizon, Sprint, I mean, 4G technology, the timing advance is 78 meters.
All right. So is this an estimate that's being made by T-Mobile?
The distance?
Yeah.
The tower?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So would you say that this is T-Mobile's best estimate and it's actually no more accurate than the call detail records themselves?
Well, so I think that in my opinion and experience, generally the timing advance is accurate. The call detail records are accurate. I guess I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So I was just asking, it's T-Mobile's best estimate on this map, correct? Is it any different or any more or less accurate than the call data records, the CDR?
Well, the call detail records will have to be more accurate because they are less precise. So without a doubt, that is the sector that the phone chose. The timing advance measurement, in my experience, is accurate, but there are factors that could make it less accurate than the call detail records. For instance, we just talked about how the difference of whatever 3 100ths in math could make a difference in the calculation of distance. Earlier we talked about how like multi-path signal bounces off multiple surfaces on the way to the phone or on the way from the phone back to the tower. That would increase the amount of time that it traveled, which would then also increase the distance. So although I think the timing advance is accurate because it's more precise, there's the potential for it to be less accurate than call detail records.
So do you know of any publications or studies that would back up your opinion?
No.
Okay, so based on the information, you can't really tell the court precisely which locations these phones are falling in, can you?
No, and one of the limitations of cellular analysis is that you can only say a general area where the device would be at a given time.
All right, so even with the general analysis, all of the stuff that we've gone through for about 4 or 5 hours, at the end of the day, you can never give an exact location.
True.
All right. Can you tell us if a phone is on a highway?
So that depends. For one data point, no, you can't. You just general area where the phone would be. If you have multiple data points, you may be able to infer an opinion as to where you think it is. For instance, like in this case, if you see the device traveling from east to west, the towers along 595, and you look at the time between those towers, you could infer what the speed would be and say, okay, I think it's likely that they're on the highway because I know the area, or they're on State Road 84 traveling at a certain speed. But from the cellular data alone, no, you can't tell if the phone's in a car, on the side of the road, on the road.
So can you tell if it's in the woods?
No.
How about another residence located in the area?
No.
And could you tell if somebody was walking around a car with the phone? Would you be able to tell that?
No.
Okay. Go back to your report. So it'd be your testimony that this phone, 9807, could be from here to here, correct?
Yes.
And what was the distance from here to here?
Oh, I don't know what the distance is from one end of that illustrated arc to the other.
Okay. Well, can you actually guarantee that the phone is in that arc?
No.
And why can't you guarantee that it's in this arc?
So that arc estimate, or that arc depicts the time in advance measurement with the time before, including the 78 years time in advance, which is all the resolution you can get. Why I can't guarantee that it's there as well. One, the sectors themselves, the sector itself. So that's an illustration. It's an approximation of the sector, right? Like talked earlier about it being a flashlight to illustrate the direction that the cell signal is going. If anyone drew a flashlight, we draw a cone or something that looks like this. But everyone who's used a flashlight knows that it's not actually like a tube on a paper towel. It's not actually just the tube, right? And like it's brightest here and it gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So although in this illustration there's hard black arms that say this is the limit of the sector, that's not really the case. There's some bleed over it. So that's the first point, is that it could be, in this instance, potentially over here, potentially over here. Second instance is, as we talked about, if there was something that delayed the signal traveling from the tower to the phone or back, that would make the distance longer than where the phone actually is. So it's a depiction of the records. But with 100% accuracy to say that the phone has to be in this band, no, I can't say that 100%.
Okay. And I did switch the page, so we're looking at your page 12 of your report. And looking at this, can you tell the court if the phone is between these two bands at any given time?
I infer, in my opinion, yes, because it had to have been at some point in time between those two bands, because it was here at 350 or somewhere within this area at 352.58 and somewhere here at 353.48. So to get from here to here, we had to be somewhere between them at some point.
But didn't you tell us earlier that you don't always necessarily connect to the tower closest to you as the one with the best signal? So could it be possible that this is actually the tower with the best signal and the phone is nowhere in that sector?
So this is from the engineering report. And so the engineering report had two measurements for this tower and sector, the 0.58 miles and the 1.16 miles. The engineering report does not, that's the network's perspective. So what I was talking about with the call detail records, where the phone measures the clearest, strongest signal, and then picks the tower or the antenna on the tower that offers the clearest, strongest signal, that's from the call detail records. The engineering reports at the network's perspective.
So where did you get the engineering reports from?
From T-Mobile.
So didn't you previously testify that Detective Moretti gave you these records?
Yes.
So did they come from Moretti or from T-Mobile?
From Detective Moretti.
All right.
From T-Mobile.
And so the engineering report, is it what Ms. Bradley, the state attorney, had put up previously, all these numbers and environments? Is that,
yes.
Okay. Do you double check that report?
What do you mean?
Do you validate it? So you get this report with all these numbers. Do you have a system in place at the FBI that you could cross-reference this to make sure that the latitude and longitude and the distance is actually what it's saying it is?
No.
So, do you even know if it's credible?
Yeah, my experience.
the scope.
Overruled. You can ask the question.
So, yeah, the accuracy of this report is like pinned on those records being accurate. In my experience, the records that we get from telecommunications providers are accurate, which is why this works.
Well, let me ask you. So, have you ever had an engineer come through on any of your cases, the 130 cases that you had, and have them validate the information that you got from T-Mobile, Sprint, or whatever carrier it is?
So I've had cases where there was a Actually, no, not for me. I know of other cast assets who had cases where there was a red flag or a problem, and then we contacted the engineers and said, hey, there's something that's not making sense. We need to look more into this. But for me, no.
All right. Do you know of any instances in these records where a mistake or any oddity occurred?
No.
All right. So, and you already testified you did not request an engineer to assist you to review these records, correct?
Correct.
And you said that one of these bands would be a little less than 100 yards wide?
Yes.
All right. I want to show you this engineering report that you're talking about.
I'll take a piss real quick. Give me a second.
Okay. So there's a section on this engineering report that's labeled environment. All right. And it goes on to tell you, and I'm looking for, good thing I didn't do the cell tower analysis, it'd be a mess, so obviously I can't handle this modern technology. But you have a section in here called environment. I just want to find where it's at.
It's to the left.
Yeah, it's so small I can't even see it. But you know what I'm talking about when I talk about environment, correct?
Yes.
Do you rely on this?
No.
Why?
I don't know how it's calculated.
So, and it goes back to my other questioning. This document that's produced from T-Mobile, from their engineer, your engineering report, says that T-Mobile can tell you if a phone is outside, inside. So, why do you rely on everything else in this document, but you won't rely on that column?
So I rely on the time in advance, I guess, just because I have, well, I think it really comes down to two things. One, because I understand it, right? I understand speed of light times time equals the distance. And two, because I've done that and I've been able to validate that through my real world experience. That's why I have confidence in time in advance. When it comes to the environment and the latitude and longitude coordinates and their associated confidence level, why don't I use that? Well, I didn't use them in this report because I don't know all the factors that go into calculating those. And I don't have real world experience validating those or disproving them to speak to myself personally, whether they would be exact.
You had previously testified that in your training you actually get invited out to different cellular companies, correct?
Yeah.
And did you get invited to T-Mobile?
Never been to T-Mobile.
Okay. Do you know if any of your cast people went to T-Mobile?
I don't know.
Okay. Can you tell us how T-Mobile can tell if the phone is indoors?
Don't know.
Have you ever performed any testing to determine if a phone is indoors or outdoors based on the timing advance records from T-Mobile?
No.
And is there any way for you to verify that environment column? The environment estimate from T-Mobile?
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to test it, we could coordinate something with T-Mobile, or I'm sure T-Mobile could test it, where they would use test phones and do things that people do with phones, calls, texts, data. They would look at the phones on their record and say, like, okay, here's our control group, and here's what the data said, and here's where the phones actually were. So is there a way to do it? I'm sure that.
We were kind of just talking about a hypothetical, because
Right.
as far as you know, it's never happened.
Right.
Okay. So, with the true call distance estimates, has T-Mobile ever shared the calculation with you or possibly other members of the casting?
The calculation is the speed 3.0 or 2.997, whatever times the time. That's the calculation.
So have they shared that with you guys? Have you gone through to find out what exact number is, how they're coming up with these formulas, anything like that?
Yeah, and that's that calculation for time in advance. Again, that's not unique to T-Mobile. That's how all phones have to function on cellular networks. They have to have time in advance measurements of. That's what we'll talk about multipliers and.
So it's just T-Mobile gives it to you. You have 100% trust in T-Mobile and its records. So you just get them and you go off of that, correct?
I plot the data from T-Mobile and do an analysis. I don't take anything for given as I'm doing my analysis.
But you don't know if the numbers are correct because you don't have an engineer validating or rechecking anything, do you? So you're,
I'm taking, I'm relying on the accuracy of the records, yes.
all right. So basically you're telling us that we're to trust an undisclosed calculation as being accurate.
Argument.
Right. And do you not have any of the measurements for the underlying true call data?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of columns on this engineering report. It's possible that something is buried there, but I don't think so.
Okay. Go back to your report. So in this report, you say that the measurements of phone number.
Zoom out. Just like on the phone.
I'll move it up here. So your report says, you can come in the stage if you want to help me.
Of course.
That these two phones, 9807 and 9081, are in the area of the crime scene, correct?
Does it say consistent with, or what's the?
Your language is
Bring out the alcohol.
cellular measurements are consistent with, yes, the two phones being in the area of the crime scene.
Yes.
All right.
Let's go get it.
But is
I
it
didn't
not
drink
true
all
that they could also be over here?
Yes.
New Casamigos.
And could 9807 be over here? And 9081 be over here?
Yes.
Could it be over here?
I don't think so. Yes. Yes.
And right here?
Yes.
And again, this is an estimate because it could just be pinging to the tower with the best signal, correct?
No. Because this is from the engineering report.
Okay. So, page 14 of your report.
Okay, so let me kind of give I pause it too. I give a little fundamental understanding and discrepancy what's going on. I believe this is the black lady that's on Melly's team. She's the I believe she's an not expert, but they probably told her, yo, you gotta prep to annihilate this GPS phone triangulation technique the prosecutor's gonna do. We're gonna handle the other shit. So this is Melly's lawyer. Now, one big difference that and I think right here the guy who's the FBI guy just caught her with it, because previously early in the trial they said if you have a cell phone and say there's a bunch of towers around me, They said, does your phone automatically always connects and works through or sends service or connects a call through the nearest tower? The answer was no. It usually opts to the one with the best signal, and sometimes the one that is not the closest has the best signal. Now, that's what she's asking the guy to say, well, all this shit is trash if you're saying, like, basically this evidence is nothing if you're saying that you can't judge proximity because a phone could be connected to any tower with the best with the best service, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be the nearest one, because if it's the nearest one, you could kind of put it in an area. They could be connecting to a further one just because it had better service. What the FBI guy is saying is like, yo, check this out, dog. The FBI guy is saying the data we get from engineering doesn't matter about the signal. It only matters about the proximity. So I'm trying to see how she's gonna kind of counter it. I'm gonna be honest with you, and no disrespect to her. She, first of all, I think she has the hardest job, because this is probably the hardest thing to counter. It's not a witness testimony. This is pretty much black and white, and you're not an expert yourself, and you're talking to a guy who has like probably 20 years of experience doing this. You have to somehow nullify this. That's why she probably didn't say anything for any of the trial until now. I don't know if she's the best person to do it, but we're gonna see. Anyway, let me go back.
This area, correct?
Yes.
But would you agree it's not actually touching any of the points of interest?
At that time?
Yes.
Yes. If you find points of interest, if you mean the locations that were highlighted earlier in the presentation, yes, it's not overlapping the Montessori Academy or any other place at that time.
Okay, let's turn to page 16 of your report. So does this show phone number ending in 9081 near the hospital?
Yes, that's consistent with the phone being at the hospital.
But this science is not actually precise enough to pinpoint the location of the phone, correct?
Correct.
So while you say it's consistent with it being at the hospital, you actually don't know that, do you?
From the cellular data alone, no.
Right. For the 17, here you've mapped again the data for 9807. And again, would you agree that this macaroni does not touch any of the points of interest?
Yes.
Can you explain what this means? Can you see that?
340, the text box that you're pointing to?
Yes.
Yes. So that means that there were multiple data points on that tower and sector between 3:43 a.m. and 3:52 a.m.
Okay, so 3:43 to 3:52 a.m., that phone number was pinging off of this tower.
So it's from the engineering reports, and that tower saw the phone multiple times between 3:43 and 3:52.
Okay, so let's go over here, and what's this mean?
The same thing. All these cell sites that are shown are from the protocol measurement data from Sprint's engineering reports, and those towers in that sector on that tower saw the phone at whatever times indicated.
Do you know the difference from this point to this point?
I'd imagine it's a couple miles.
So from this report, we're showing that there's a couple miles difference, but the phone is pinging over here at 3:49, but according to your report, between 3:43 and 3:52, it's pinging here. And what does this one mean, right?
Another hard thing why this is going to be super hard for this lawyer to try to, like debunk everything fully. It's not like they could go to the areas with their cell phones and say, I don't know, bring 5 Sprint phones or T-Mobile phones, bring 3 AT&T phones, bring 2 Verizon, and bring, I don't know, Cricket Mobile or whatever, and then drive through the area at different speeds, and then get this data to analyze and match it to what they're saying that Melly did. They don't have a subpoena. They don't have a subpoena authority. They can't ask They can't ask T-Mobile for that data. Only the police could. So essentially, they're just kind of working off what the police gave them, right? It's not like, for example, with DNA, you could go do your own test with DNA and get your own analysis as well. You know what I mean? To a certain extent, obviously. They're not going to just give you the fucking evidence with the blood and say, hey, the blood is yours. No. But they'll give you some raw data that you can kind of work with. But here, you're kind of like out of your league because you can't really reproduce this at all. You got to trust them.
348.
So it's pinging from this tower at 348.
That tower saw the phone, yes.
All right. And then down here?
350.
So, again, back here, between 343 to 352, it was pinging off of this tower. But at 350, it was down here.
No. The phone wasn't down there. It wasn't up here. The phone wasn't in any of those places. That's not what the data says. The data is saying that these towers at those times saw the phone. This is all from the engineering reports, which means that these towers that see them, are not necessarily the tower with the very strongest signal. It's not necessarily the serving cell that saw it. If we had distance information at these times, we'd see like a band, just like we did on the T-Mobile record. So for instance, at this one, 349, we'd see a distance, whether it was a number like this, or like this, whatever. The distance column on that engineering report for all these data points was blank. We don't have distance. So we know that these towers saw the phone. And we know that they were not necessarily the serving cell. It could have been. Any one of them could have been, but we don't know that. And we don't have any calls on the call detail records to cross-check and say, okay, well, which tower did the phone reach out to and did need to make a call? So we're left with the question then is, well, what's this mean? Because as you were just asking, as we were just talking about, 349 falls between 343 and 352. How could 2 towers in 2 completely different areas both see the phone? Well, they both did see the phone at different times because they registered that connection with the phone. So if you ask me what's my opinion, what's that mean? It's like, well, the phone was someplace where all of these towers could see it. And I note that this one is pointed generally west, this one's pointed west-southwest, this one's pointed southeast, this is northeast, this is this way. So my conclusion would be that this data, which it's hard to form a conclusion from because I don't have the distance information I want. It's not going to say, okay, the phone is, generally it's in Miramar. We know that, right? It's not in Fort Lauderdale or Miami. It's probably somewhere in the middle of all these towers. So if I'm asked a specific question, like, hey, is this consistent with the phone being in Silver Lakes? I would say yes. Is it consistent with the phone being in McDonald's? Yes. I mean, this is a...
So it could be anywhere in Miramar, basically.
I don't think it could be anywhere in Miramar. I think it could be anywhere kind of in this map area. I think it's a fair statement.
Okay. At any given time as well, correct? Because I just for the sake of my knowledge, when we look at this item that says 343 to 352, so I know it's hitting that tower throughout that time, right? But it's then also hitting this other tower at the exact same time, and 30 seconds is hitting this other tower. Is that a fair statement?
The network's hitting the phone. The phone isn't hitting the network, but yes.
Okay, and then how far can a phone go? Is it 1 mile? Could it be between 1 mile and 20 miles? Or could a phone ping off a tower that's 50 miles away? Do you have any background on that?
Yeah, so it depends kind of what you're asking. If you're asking how far away can a phone be from a tower when it makes a call, well, that depends. If you're asking how far away can a tower see a phone, which is a different thing, because the phone choosing the tower is going to rely on the phone's clear, strong signal, and that also depends. Generally, I see something in the range of like a couple miles, but I've seen in extreme cases many miles that a tower can see a phone.
Okay. So even with this is, again, based on that,
Yep.
any area
Yeah,
could be in this ping.
To try and make a conclusion about a precise location for a phone on this data is I don't think possible based on this data.
So wouldn't it be more accurate just to show a range of where it could be at rather than trying to do these curves and pinpoint the precision?
What do you mean?
I mean, you would agree with me that there are some unknowns. Even though we're talking about the speed of light static, we don't know what T-Mobile's using. Are they rounding up to the 3, or are they actually keeping the right number, correct?
Well, regardless of what they're doing, they're giving us a distance, and that's the distance that's plotted. So we plot the distance, applying the records that T-Mobile gave us, not saying, okay, the phone's here in this phone or something like that. We're saying, hey, this is what the records show.
Well, it seems like you're giving testimony that it's precise, but when we get to the data, how it's used, that it's actually really just an estimate. So is it precise, or is this an estimate that you're giving us?
I guess it's not an estimate like hey, just some number that's made up, just a ballpark, hey, out of 10,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
But if you're asking, I think you're asking about really the accuracy, not the precision, because that number, like if the number is 0.54 miles, that's a precise number, right? That's down to hundredths of a mile. You're asking how accurate is that number? We'll say, okay, generally that's accurate. And that's why with my testimony, even when I have a precise number like 0.54 miles from a tower, I still say, hey, it's consistent with it being at this location, where it's generally in the area of this apartment complex or something, because the possibility it may not be precisely there.
So based on that map, could it be possible that you had 2 phones registered to the same person on the same carrier being operated by 2 different people who were sitting next to each other? Can those 2 phones ping off different towers?
When you say ping off towers, you mean are you talking about the engineering report?
Yeah, the engineering report.
Could different towers see those phones?
Yeah, so
Yes.
we're both sitting in the car here.
Yep.
Is it possible that it's pinging off to here and then the other person's phone is pinging here?
Yes.
While they're next to each other.
Yes.
All right. Can you tell if this phone's in somebody's pocket?
No.
Can you tell if it's left on the car seat?
No.
Can you tell if we've had the phone?
No.
Okay. No further questions.
Counsel, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
You ready to redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
You're ready, you may proceed.
So in terms of, I want to make sure we're clear and it's very clear for the jury. What's the difference between the engineering report and the call detail report?
So the call detail records show what the phone was doing, like the phone's calls and texts. And they will list a tower and a sector in them. And that's the tower and the sector that the phone identified as the one that offers the clearest, strongest signals. That's the tower that the phone chose to connect to when it needed to make a call or send a text. That's the phone's perspective. The engineering report is the network's perspective. So different towers that may or may not be the.
Wait, do we get rated? Who rated us? Holy. Hey, everybody, big salute to Sunder Garden. I'm fucking up his name. Sonder Guard, LOL. Yo, appreciate you, homie. Thank you for the raid, brother. My bad. Like, I'm over here. I'm doing like a million different things. Oh, appreciate you for the raid, yo. Not too sure. I'm not too familiar with you, but I appreciate you for, Oh, my boy, he on the Free Melly team. Okay, I see him in the chat. I see my boy in the chat. Nah, he said we got to get Melly freed, man. I ain't gonna lie, man. This is a nitty gritty of the case right now. Obviously everybody who's watching, and there's so many people tuning in, not only on my stream but everywhere else, they're like really locked in on. Like I'm surprised that y'all are watching. Even this is boring, but it's not boring because it's really important. If this guy doesn't do a good job of convincing the jury that Melly was at that location, this is a guy to do it. To basically say, hey, if he had that phone, he was in that car. If he doesn't do it, Melly's beating the case because they have nothing else but GPS evidence. They don't have no DNA. They don't have no gun. They only have basically what was called I'm forgetting the term, but it's like circumstantial evidence or whatever it's called. But they're basically saying that, my nigga, you went in the car, and when you went in the car, you got out at the time we think the murder happened, which means you are the only person. There was no drive-by. You're the only person that could have done it. And because you're the only person who could have done it, and you got out the car and you're acting like you was not a part of this, you did it. So if they can't prove that he was in the car at the time, now we know he was in the car because we saw the surveillance footage. He hopped in the car. But if they can't prove that his phone was transmitting, so to be honest, if his phone was turned off, or say he left his phone at the studio, if Melly had left his phone at the studio, there is no case, which is crazy to think, right? Like without. Well, it probably would have been a case. Let me stop. They would have charged the driver. They would have overcharged the driver with murder. So Bortland would have got charged with murder, trying to get him to give up the real murderer, in their opinion, because they believe that somebody, they believe it would have been Melly, but they can't, at that point, they can't get Melly without him snitching. You know what I mean? Now, they could try to get Melly without him snitching. If Melly left his phone at the studio, no way they could get Melly unless the driver snitches. So they were going to charge the driver with murder, try to act like they're going to go for death for the driver. The driver is going to be like, what the fuck you talking about? That's what they're hoping, and be like, yo, fuck it, I'll cooperate. You get what I mean? Somebody said, what's going to happen to Bortland? Bortland is charged with accessory to murder. Yo, Uncle Dave, you say, yo, man, that's crazy. Charging a guy with a death sentence over his phone location. Well, I mean, they're not sending him to death because of his phone location. They're trying to send him to death because 2 people died. You get what I mean? The only way to prove that in their minds that he killed them is through the phone location. So it's not like, oh, he's getting death, or they're trying to go for the death penalty for a phone location. That's their only evidence. All right.
Servants could have seen the phone.
Why is it important to differentiate?
Somebody says, so Ak, if they prove that the cell phone location isn't accurate, do you think this will affect all cases with cell phones as proof as evidence? Remember, this is not cell phone evidence, because the previous evidence where they say they got the phone and extracted, I haven't seen courts really strike none of that shit down and say, oh, Cellbrite or somebody extracted something from the cell phone that wasn't there, right? But there is no real incriminating evidence on Melly's phone. It's not like some people may say he's dumb, but he wasn't that dumb. It's not like he killed them niggas and said, let me take a picture and save it in my fucking camera roll, and then they later go through his phone and find the pictures of the dead body in the camera roll. You get what I mean? He wasn't that stupid. But they're using the phone essentially as just a tracking device. So they're using the phone as an AirTag. They're using the phone as, hey, this is the only way we could prove that he was there. He's not going to take the stand to say whether he was there or not. He doesn't even need to say that. But they're trying to hope by a few things. We showed y'all on a video when they left the studio, he got in the car on the left passenger side. We then showed y'all through ballistics that the bullets got fired from the left passenger side. Now, what was said by Bortland and what was later kind of found out in investigation that Melly got out the car, you could get out the car at any time. Like, I mean, some people could call it suspicious, but you could get in the car at any time. You'd be like, oh, nah, yo, I'm Fredo Bang about to come pick me up, drop me off here, right? What they need to prove, right, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that he was 100% in the car when the shooting happened, and they already kind of like put forth that there were shots coming from the left to the right side. The medical examiner still has to testify on the death wounds to be like, how were these guys shot? We heard some talk about some stifling, in a sense of like the gun was so close to some of the victim's face, they got burned by the flash of the gun. You get what I mean? So their face not only had a bullet wound, or their skin not only had a bullet wound, they had gunpowder residue that kind of erupted out of the gun, but also had burn marks. If you ever fire a gun and like stick your hand right where the fucking barrel is, you're gonna burn yourself damn near. You know what I mean? It's like a mini explosion. So all those things, but this this GPS shit is really important. By the way, there's no, you know that lawyer I like, the one that's Jamaican? He's been knocking everything out of the park. There's no way for this lawyer to knock this out of the park with this FBI agent. And you have to realize, here's the thing too. This FBI agent has done hundreds of these. If he gets on here and he says, yeah, this proves nothing, like that one guy. Remember the one guy who said they took SWAT? You know that one guy, and he said, oh, yeah, this pretty much proves nothing. This FBI guy cannot say that. Because if I have been convicted using this GPS tracking of a cell phone, this is grounds for appeal. You get what I mean? And by the way, that old dude who said whatever he did proved nothing, I guarantee he's retiring in the next year or two. You can tell he didn't give a fuck. Because, like, bro, they're not putting you on the stand to say some dumb shit to support the defense. You're the cops. Anyway, let's get back into it.
Between those two.
Because, so if I'm plotting doing a report, and I plot the phone that was disturbing, the tower that was the disturbing cell, then I'm showing, okay, wherever the phone was in this coverage area, it saw this because they won the best tower, the strongest signal point. With the engineering report, like the slide we were just looking at, none of those may have been the best one. So if I'm looking at something that I plotted because of call detail records, I would infer that that's probably the tower that's the closest or the best line of sight. With the engineering data, that may not be the case.
Okay, and so in the one we were just talking about, that was under the 3717895. That phone, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if you can explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there's discussion about the accuracy versus the precision of the records. Is this a precise estimate of which towers saw that phone?
Yes.
And how can you say that?
Because it listed, the records listed specific towers that saw the phone at a specific time.
Are you ever going to say, based on the data that you have here, precisely where that phone was?
No.
What conclusions can you draw from this map based on your training and experience?
That the phone is generally somewhere in the area shown on the map. In my opinion, it's likely to be in the center of the map here, because that's where the direction of the antennas and towers that saw the phone are pointing.
So counsel asked you about the latitude and longitude columns that are on the call records from the engineering report.
Yes.
And so you mentioned that you do not validate these particular records.
Yes.
Could they be accurate?
They certainly could be accurate, yes.
Can you explain as to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you call 911, what does a cell phone provider send out to law enforcement?
At a minimum, it has to provide the tower and sector codes.
Oh. And at maximum, what can they provide?
I don't know.
In terms of those coordinates and things of that, is that also collected for the purposes of location for 911 emergency?
Maybe.
Okay. You said that, and counsel asked you a lot about validating your findings, your records, your analysis. When you are doing the training and experience, do you validate the records that are given to you by going out and finding a specific phone in the field?
Yes.
Okay. Would you be able to validate your records with other corroborating information?
Yes.
For example, a video. Would that help validate your records if the phone is seen in the video?
Yes.
If there is video or surveillance footage of locations and the phone is seen in that area, would that validate your information?
Yes.
Is, for example, on the cell phone records that have been placed in the mapping of the 772-713-9807 and going to the 248-9081, 440 to 4:52 a.m. If that phone is found at the Miramar Memorial Hospital, would that validate your findings?
Yes.
Is cell phone technology new?
No.
How long has it been around?
Decades.
Okay. The materials and things that you are relying upon, how long have those been used?
A long time. More than a decade.
In terms of the difference between the 2.99 and 3 to the 10th, what types of difference in distance are you looking at when you're making those tiny advance bands?
So, that's not a huge number, a huge difference between them, so that would be generally a small difference between the distance estimates there.
Are we talking meters or miles?
Meters.
In terms of the distance, you said it's 39 meters plus or minus each direction from the center of that location.
Yes.
The specific location that's plotted is based on the location of the tower.
Yes.
Is the tower a known quantity?
Yes.
Does the tower move?
No. I mean, it can, but as of the records, no.
With regards to publications and trainings and things of that nature that you rely upon, are you trained in this area?
Yes.
What types of resources and materials are you used during your training with the FBI CAST analysis?
Yeah, so instructors from Florida Institute of Technology who teach cellular theory and network engineering, network engineers from all the major service providers, other related fields, certain like manufacturers, the ecosystem, and then also we have a lot of peer instruction as well.
In terms of if a child is kidnapped in Miami, are they going to call an engineer to find them?
No, they'll probably call the police or the FBI.
Council asked and brought up a lot of things about the distance and the measurements in the records. Is it possible to go through the CDRs or in the instance of the Sprint, or for example, the engineering report on the 9807 phone number and highlight instances of exactly where on your records it corresponds with the records as provided from T-Mobile?
Yeah, we could go through line by line and say, here's the map that I made, here's how the corresponding line and the T-Mobile report counts.
And in terms of the records and things that were sent to you, were they forwarded with a T-Mobile email address attached to them?
Yeah, I got them on a thumb drive, and they had a certification from T-Mobile or Sprint or whatever.
Okay. In terms of, there's a lot of discussion, I want to make sure it's clear for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you were plotting some of these particular phones, specifically the Sprint ones, are you saying that these towers are the ones that would have been used if they were making a phone call?
No.
What are you saying?
These towers saw the phone.
Can you give any more indication on the direction or anything on that specific issue?
On the direction, you can see the side of the tower that saw the phone, but that's it.
Has this type of analysis been used to solve crimes?
Yes.
Has it been used to locate missing persons?
Yes.
Judge, I'm going to object because this line of question is outside of my cross-examination.
Overruled.
In terms of the data that you rely upon, has it been validated in your personal experience and training?
Yes.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
This witness excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Thank
finally,
you, sir. You may step down.
finally, homies there.
Counsel, want to call your next witness?
Yes, Kurt Rhodes.
Now, again, these witnesses are going to be the most important witnesses to this whole case. And by the way, we're going to keep getting experts called. Remember, this trial is expected to go till the end of July. After next week, the court takes a week off because of July 4th. And they want to have testimony of random other people for a long time. So it's going to be a lot of experts. And by the way, remember, this is only the state that it's going against